Why are the religious so blind to everything? Because they just really want to believe, of course. Not that any of that matters in the absence of evidence, because they are not remotely concerned with the truth. And we're going to see a lot of that today, so strap in. This is going to be a bumpy ride. This video comes from a channel called Sanctus, and it's going to be a long one because this guy is wrong on pretty much everything. Sorry, sometimes that just happens. He asserts that atheists are deluded without understanding what atheism is or anything about atheists or pretty much anything else in general. The truth is, though, he's the one that's deluded, and he puts that on obvious display throughout. So let's get started because this guy has a lot of problems.
In the late 1800s, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche declared, "God is dead."
Well, to be fair, there's no reason to think that any god anywhere has ever existed. Shisha was starting to wonder if he'd ever say anything. Welcome to the long musical interlude. Now, I'm not pretending to know what Nietzsche meant, nor do I really care, but if I was saying something like that, I'd mean the concept of God was dead, and I figure I would have been right if I had said that. In any rational way, the idea of a god has been dead for a very, very long time. At absolutely no time where people have claimed God did it has it ever turned out to be demonstrably the case. We have yet to find a single supernatural claim that hasn't turned out to be completely natural when it was evaluated. That, or we just don't know. It's never turned out to be an actual god of any demonstrable kind. So that's where he's starting off. How is he going to get to the delusion of atheists? I don't know. Let's wait and see.
In a world of skepticism and atheism, this has somewhat become a reality. The atheist in this case might think that leaving religion behind is a tremendous progress in humanity. But in reality, by leaving religion behind, they have in turn left principles of their own worldview that they cling to.
And once again, we have a theist with absolutely no grasp on reality. Big surprise there. I'll predict right now that this guy is going to spend a whole lot of time telling us what we supposedly believe. No, we don't. But you do. No, we don't. Yes, you do. They expect everyone to be just like they are, and when it turns out that we're not, they have to insist otherwise. This is your worldview. No, it's not. Yes, it is. How many times have you heard that? I'm sorry, but you don't get to tell me what I think in my own head. If you want to know, ask. Don't assert. Ask. Don't make a fool of yourself. Of course, that's kind of par for the course with the religious, isn't it? They can't help themselves because these people are not rational. So let's see where he's going to go with this, because I don't predict it's going to be any place good.
Principles such as ethics and morality, metaphysics and logic, and finally, free will.
Yeah, I thought so. Now, I knew he was going to touch on morality. It's in the video description, and while I try really hard not to necessarily read it lest it spoil the fun, it was hard not to catch the first couple of words, which read, "Atheists claim to have morals." In fact, I like doing these morality videos because I think the moral argument is one of the most absurd in their basket of tricks. They do not understand how reality works, nor do they care. This is about faith and fifis, nothing more. Taking these people apart is painfully simple, not that it really matters because they are incapable of understanding any other options. They just really want to believe. That doesn't make any of it true, though, which ought to matter, not that they actually care. So go on, Sanctus, or whatever your name is, make a complete fool of yourself. I bet it won't be the first time.
Morality and ethics is a difficult subject for atheists.
No, it's not. It's simple. Humans make up morals. We always have, and we always will. What's so hard with that? It's just not emotionally comforting for the religious. Granted, it's not emotionally comforting for a lot of people, but we're focusing on the religious for the moment. What you feel doesn't matter. What you like doesn't matter. What strokes your childish little ego is irrelevant. The fact is, morals are subjective. We just made them up. We imposed them collectively on society. Morals differ, sometimes dramatically, across space and time. That is what is actually going on, and I don't have a problem with that. They do. They are intellectually lazy. They don't want to have to do all of the hard work to work out the details. They just want hard and fast rules passed down from on high that they don't have to think about, they just have to follow. And they don't have to say, well, here's why this is a good thing to do. No, they just say, God said so, and that's the end of the story. But that's not the reality that they live in. They don't really care though, do they?
And there are various different views on the matter. The biggest issue that we will see throughout this video is that there is no objective basis to ground any concepts they hold to.
And we don't say that there are. This is where we see that the religious are getting really uncomfortable, and that's where they go wrong. They want that objectivity, whether it exists or not. Then they try to project those problems onto others, but we don't have a problem with it. They do. We're just going along with the way the world actually works, following the evidence that actually exists, not the imaginary things in our heads. That's them, not us. This is why I laugh the second that the religious say, from a fill-in-the-blank perspective. I hear this from most religions. I don't give a crap about your perspective. I care about reality. I don't care about your feelings. I care about the facts. I am not looking for comfort. I am looking for the truth. The only perspective that's important is the truth. And they have zero interest in that, do they? It's why they wind up looking so stupid in the end. Because they are.
And this applies especially to morality. A common claim, for example, from atheists is that it is objectively wrong to murder someone. But why is this objectively the case?
It's not. I don't think I've ever heard an atheist say that, or at least I don't remember one that has. This is just something that he made up in his head, and they do that quite a bit. This is him projecting. Now, granted, even if an atheist did say that, they'd just be wrong. Murder is wrong insofar as individual cultures have made it wrong in their beliefs and in their laws. There have been societies where murder wasn't wrong because, society has broken down. You could kill people without consequence. Search history, that happens all the time. Now, is that a society that I would ever want to live in? No, because I kind of like being alive, but to deny that it happens is foolish. It shows that you have no grasp on reality. Societies without some kind of prohibition on murder, they don't tend to last very long. Subjectively, I think that's a pretty good thing.
Sam Harris, the atheistic philosopher, gives his idea of human morality.
Fuck Sam Harris. Now, I guess we'll listen to him, but I don't really care what Sam Harris says. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care about the people. I care what they can back up with actual evidence, and philosophy is terrible at that. It's terrible at a lot of things, to be honest. It gets horribly misused, especially when it goes from opinion to fact, where they assume that the things in their head are just actually true because they really want it to be. But sure, let's hear what Sam has to say, not that I really care. His opinions mean absolutely nothing to me.
How could you ever say that forcing women to wear burqas is wrong?
You can't if you're talking objectively, because right and wrong are subjective terms. There is no objective right and there is no objective wrong. There's only shit that we all made up collectively. If you want to talk about what is more defensible within a particular subjective context, then sure, I guess you can do that, but it's still all subjective from the start. If you start from the context of personal freedom, then sure, forcing women to do anything, or men for that matter, or dogs, I guess, if you want to go that far, that's not preferable. For a culture that doesn't value that, though, that's something else. For a society that doesn't place value on women at all, that might make sense internally to force them to do whatever men want them to do. And that's true of the reverse. If you had a matriarchal society that didn't value men, then forcing men to do things might make sense in that context. You can argue that you don't like that, and of course you're welcome to do that, but that doesn't make it objectively wrong. There is no such thing.
From the point of view of science. I said, well, because I think it's pretty clear that right and wrong relate to human well-being.
But you've just arbitrarily picked human well-being as your goal. For people who don't care about human well-being, or who don't care about it for half the population or whatever, your speech is completely irrelevant. This is Sam offering his opinion from a particular perspective that he finds personally appealing. So what? This is exactly why I am not impressed with the whole human well-being bullshit. Even if you start off with that as a subjective goal, that's all it's ever going to be. Entirely subjective. You can never get to objectivity no matter how hard you try. First, you're never going to get everybody on board with that goal. You're just not. That's not something that you can do. Everybody has their own ideas and their own perspectives, and that's never going to change. But even if you did, let's just assume that that happens, you will never get universal agreement on how to achieve that goal. And that's why I think people like Sam and Matt Dillahunty and people like that, I think those people are just full of shit on this. They assume that once you pick a goal, everybody's going to be just like they are and all agree on the best way to implement everything. And that is laughably untrue. I have talked to plenty of these people, and when I ask them, well, what do you do with people who don't agree? They have all responded, I don't care about those people. These idiots tend to be hyper-authoritarian. They expect that they're going to get to impose their views on everyone else. And where the hell's the objectivity in that?
And it's just as clear that forcing half the population to live in cloth bags and beating them or killing them when they try to get out is not a way of maximizing human well-being.
Sam Harris pushes human well-being as something that is virtuous, but he doesn't explain why or how.
No, he doesn't. He just assumes that's the goal everyone ought to have. Why? Because it makes him feel good. It's sad that I'm kind of agreeing with a theist here, but you know, it is what it is. Sam and the religious are pretty much doing the same thing. They are picking goals that appeal to themselves on an emotional level, assuming everybody else is just like they are, and then, well, if force is required to get him where he wants to go, that's okay because they were right all along, right? Just ask them. But they won't even address the bigger questions. What if people disagree with you? What if people don't share your goals? What if the best way to get to well-being for modern people who are alive right now is to just, I don't know, pave the earth? Who cares about the future, right? Just give me utopia right now. But people like Sam and the rest, they don't tend to agree with that, do they? They tend to be big on environmental causes. They tend to be hardcore left-wing supporters. And that doesn't make them right either. They tend to look at themselves just like the religious do. Well, of course we're right. We're always right. That's how this works. Anybody who disagrees with us is wrong. Why? Because we say so. Again, what do you do with honest disagreement? They've got no real answers.
Why isn't the opposite the case? And how come going against human well-being isn't good? If atheism is true, then this is simply your opinion, and it's purely subjective.
And it is. Welcome to reality. This is why we rely on collective opinions. This is why societies exist. We get together in groups and make decisions based on collective opinions, on how that particular society will be run. That's how it usually works, at least in Western societies, although in the East, not necessarily. These societies can be small, like, I don't know, the size of a single home, or massive, like the size of an entire planet, but that's usually how it's done at all scales. We either make those decisions ourselves and then we impose them on everybody else by fiat, or we elect people to make those decisions in our stead, or we just cower as people more powerful than us make them and force us to follow them, which a lot of people really have a problem with, and I think that's a good thing too. If the people don't rise up and overthrow the dictators, then those dictators get to decide. Nobody said life was fair. This is just how it works. Your feelings mean absolutely nothing.
It would be the same as asking, do you like Brussels sprouts or hate them? Sam Harris simply has no objective foundation to base his morality on.
And he doesn't pretend to. So what? This is honestly just one person saying, well, I don't like your opinion. You'll have to pay attention to my opinion or else, which is patently absurd. If we're talking about objectivity, actual objectivity, which is defined as the fact of being based on facts and not influenced by personal beliefs or feelings, or to use a more philosophical definition, it's something that exists independent of any mind. You know, no mind came up with it. It just exists like gravity beyond anyone's opinion or assent to it. That does not describe morality at all, at least not the morality that we actually have. It's why you have to ask people what they mean by these terms, and that's what I mean when I'm talking about objectivity. It's got to be something that just is, and you have to be able to demonstrate that it just is. Go ahead, because I don't think you can do it.
It's reliant on him and humankind, and therefore subjective.
Yet your view of morality, I assume, is based on your imaginary friend. You know, God made it up, therefore it's dependent on God, and therefore it is hopelessly subjective. Or was that not what you were going for?
And where do our notions of right and wrong come from? Well, clearly they've been drummed into us by evolution, that the product of these apish urges and social emotions.
Not necessarily. Sure, there are some things that come from evolution, but a lot of it comes from culture. We believe a lot of things because they've been shoved into our heads from before the time that we had any capacity to rationally evaluate them. You know, like religion. That's how it's been done since time immemorial. None of this stuff is actually true in the sense of being demonstrably true in reality. It's just crap that we believe based on comfort and repetition. It's stuff that people really like. It's stuff that people just want to believe. Where have we ever heard that one before?
Sam Harris then appeals to evolution and thinks that this gives us some sense of objective morality. But the issue with doing this is that if evolution occurred differently, then our morals would be different, and therefore not objective.
Maybe. Some of them, perhaps. So what? Because the religious are looking for something that is true now and forever and ever, that they don't have to think about, that they don't have to ask questions about, that they don't have to work out for themselves. It's just true because an imaginary man in the sky said so, so there. That's what they mean by objective. And it's not, as I've already shown, it's subjective and it's horribly authoritarian. It's like the people who I talked about before who lived under a dictator and he imposed rules on them to follow, or else. That's all this is. Do it or else. That's not objective. That's subjective, and it doesn't even make those rules necessarily good, if good has any meaning at all, which, objectively speaking, it really doesn't. So God, in their model, is just a cosmic dictator. Why is that something you want again? Please explain.
Also, if humans never existed as well, then morality would cease to exist on his worldview.
So what? Because if humans don't exist, then what do humans need with morality? You don't think aardvarks care about human morals, do you? What difference does it make? If humans didn't exist, then nothing that's important to humans actually matters. We're not here. What the hell are you on about? Because human morals only apply to humans, just like orangutan morals only apply to orangutans. And yes, they do have their own moral system. If they didn't exist, then their morals would disappear too, wouldn't they? Why is this so hard for you people to figure out? It's really not that hard.
Sam Harris fails to realize that for morality to be objective, it cannot be dependent on humans for it to exist.
Or maybe you're both wrong, and there is no objective morality. Did you ever think about that one? No, of course not. These are the problems with moral realists because they are running on pure fifis and faith, even people like Sam Harris. Now, I think he understands a lot of it. I think he's trying to impose objectivity on his system, but it's still not objective, is it? There is no evidence that morals are anything other than what we make up in our own heads. That's it. It doesn't matter if you like that or not. That's it. Learn to deal. It's not that hard.
If you are an atheist, you have to admit that morality is simply subjective. But if this is true, then there is no binding factor that states you ought not to kill.
And I don't pretend that there is, at least not objectively. Now, if I do kill, then I know that I will have humans coming after me to hold me accountable to human laws. At the end of the day, that's really all that matters. I will be held accountable whether morality is objective or subjective. At least that justice happens in the here and now, and not in some imaginary fantasy land after you die. The religious want justice of a sort, defined by them, and the fact that not everybody is brought to justice in the here and now, well, that's just emotionally uncomfortable, and so they just make stuff up. Because that's all that's happening. They are looking for something that strokes their ego, but that's not the way the world actually works, is it? Let's come to grips with how reality is. We can do our best, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be perfect. That doesn't mean that anything is perfect. Grow up and deal with it already.
If someone has a different subjective morality that allows them to kill whomever, then you have no foundation to tell them that they're wrong.
Wrong. Society can make whatever rules it wants and enforce those rules on anybody who lives within that society. Welcome to the real world. This is one of the stupid things, well, one among many, that the religious just don't get. They think that if a thing isn't objective, then it's just a free-for-all. It's not. It's like those stupid sovereign citizens who think that if they don't recognize the law, then the law has no power over them. And then they wind up in prison for being idiots. How'd that work out for you? Because they, like the religious, are just morons. They don't understand how the world actually works, and they don't care. They live in a complete fantasy land in their heads, and they can't figure out how things actually work in reality. This guy has some serious mental problems. He needs professional help.
It's simply your opinion or your genetic mutation. Do you like coffee or tea? Do you like to kill or not kill? It's all the same under atheism.
No, it's not. I mean, I could keep saying this guy's an idiot, but I think we've already explained that perfectly adequately, so I'm not going to bother. This is not how the real world works. maybe you should try reality sometime because religion clearly isn't working out for you. You can't be this stupid all the time. Try to be better.
Now, on the issues of metaphysics and logic, does logic even exist?
Yes. However, this is going to piss a lot of people off because logic, like mathematics and the physical laws, they're just things that we made up because we've made certain observations in reality, and at least at the time that we make those observations, we think that's how reality actually works. We could be wrong in the long term. Newton was wrong. Everybody thought he was right until Einstein came along and upset that apple cart for specific circumstances. Then we just changed how we viewed nature, and nature is always a moving target in this case. We rewrote the laws of nature as we understood them, and now we're off pretending that what we think now is true, even though we did the same thing back before Einstein. We did the same thing back before we understood disease, before we understood physics, all the rest of this stuff. Like I said, it's a constantly moving target. As I've had to explain to a lot of people, we know what we know in the moment. Tomorrow, we might know something completely different. There is no eternal knowledge. That just doesn't exist. If that's what you're after, and a lot of people do, especially the religious, then you've got completely unrealistic expectations. And why do I think that's what this guy has?
As you ask yourself that question, also ask, was the question I made to you even logical? Under the preconditions of atheism, there is no foundation to logic itself.
There are no preconditions to atheism. Atheism is the lack of belief in God's full stop. That's all it is. It has nothing at all to do with logic, reason, science, or anything else. This is just tell me you're an idiot without telling me you're an idiot. What else is new? Now, there are a lot of philosophers who are telling themselves stories to make themselves feel better and to puff up their own importance, but they're still full of shit. Philosophy is mostly, not entirely, mostly just people telling each other stories and playing make-believe, just like religion. As I said, not all of it, but quite a bit of it, I'd say. That'll piss a lot of people off, too. Too bad.
For example, for David Hume, who is considered in general to be an atheist, anything with regard to causality is possible. A rock thrown at a window can break the glass, but it is conceivably as possible that the rock will phase or float through the window instead of breaking it.
If you're just going to use your imagination, then sure, anything is possible, so long as you keep it in your head. The second that you take it out into the real world and perform experiments, that's a different matter though. That's why a lot of philosophy is just in your head, because it doesn't actually mean anything in reality. And I don't give a damn about David Hume. I don't care about people. I care about demonstrable facts and evidence. If you want to play mind games, go ahead. Just play them with other people because I am not interested. I do not care. I'm only after the truth.
With this concept in mind, then therefore there is no regularity in the world. And if there is no regularity, then it is impossible to do any sort of science such as physics or biology, because logic and regularity in the natural world have no foundation and are not guaranteed.
Except there is regularity in the world. That's why we have science. That's why science works. That's how he's making this ridiculous video after all, because science created his computer and the internet and all the things necessary for both of them to work. So he's just full of shit. This guy's a moron. Big surprise there.
Atheists also assume that the world or reality that they perceive exists.
We don't really have a choice in that, do we? We all have to make that assumption because otherwise we die. The problem of hard solipsism can't be solved, at least not in any way that we can understand, but even confident solipsists are still eating and looking both ways before they cross the street. Everybody does it because everybody has to, even if there was the remote possibility that none of it is true. This is the problem with the religious, and to be fair, a lot of people. They are after unfounded confidence. They don't understand that doesn't exist. Everything that we know, or that we think we know, it's all based on the best guesses that we can take right now. It doesn't matter if you like it or not, that's still what's going on. We can only know what we know in the moment. And tomorrow, that could all change.
They seem to trust the sense data they receive through their senses as reliable information. But there is no reason to, technically, under their worldview.
What else do we have? Demonstrably, I mean. The religious, they seem to trust voices in their heads, which isn't something to really be proud of. I wouldn't be pointing fingers if you're hearing imaginary things in your head and you think you ought to bow down and kiss those things' asses, because that seems kind of stupid to me.
It's possible that only they exist as a brain in a vat, or even the scenario that René Descartes proposes, where a demon tricks them into thinking a material world exists.
It's hypothetically possible, I guess, but in the absence of any corroboratory data, why would we accept that? Granted, I'm talking about somebody with an imaginary friend who can't ask those questions of themselves. How do you know that your God isn't the devil of some other pantheon sent to lead you astray from the one true God, if there is one true God? I mean, honestly, ask the religious that sometime, and their eyes are just going to glaze over. Well, I just know. How do you know? I just know. It's ludicrous. I bet this guy would do the exact same thing. That's why they introduce faith, to get around all the really obvious problems with their theology. But faith doesn't mean anything. Faith is just delusion, and this guy is clearly deluded. Nothing in this video is actually true, except him demonstrating what an idiot he is.
Under the worldview of atheism, there is no free will.
There is also no worldview of atheism. Granted, I think it's clear that this guy's just yanking all the stuff out of his ass because none of it has been remotely valid so far. But this is pretty common among the religious, isn't it? He doesn't know what atheism is, so he's just making it all up as he goes along. But yes, I think there is free will depending on how you define it. I'm not a hard determinist. I think hard determinism is kinda dumb. There's a lot going on that we don't understand, and there are a lot of people on both sides of that metaphysical aisle who just really want to pretend that they do. So here I am, an atheist, who thinks free will of a sort does exist. At least as I personally define free will. So you're just wrong.
We are simply matter in motion. Or in other words, our genetics and chemical compounds that occur in our body tell us what to do, as if it were gears in a machine.
To some degree, yes, but that doesn't make us just meat robots. We have agency. We can make choices. That right there is free will, at least according to my definition. If I had no free will, then if I walked into an ice cream shop and said, "Give me a bowl of vanilla," I could never pick anything different. My choice would have been made by my genetics and by my environment. Yet I can go in and pick any flavor on the menu. Hell, I can go up to the counter and say, "Give me an elephant," if I really wanted to. I mean, they'd look at me funny, but I could do it, couldn't I? So what environmental factors can you demonstrate actually exist, not assert, not assume, but demonstrate, led me to ask for an elephant? Come up with one, and then we'll talk. Until then, stop being a putz.
As well, what follows from this is that things you might view as immoral become meaningless.
Not to me, because this goes back to his blind assumption that morality must be objective to have any meaning, and that is simply not true. It is demonstrably not true. All of the evidence that we have shows that subjective morals work just fine in the real world, and in fact, the world doesn't make any sense unless morality is subjective. You can't explain the state of testable reality with God wrote morality on everybody's heart. That's why they have to come up with so many excuses for why that just doesn't work. So you're just wrong on every conceivable level. Not that I think he cares one bit.
As it's not your choice to commit a crime, but it's your genetics and chemical compounds in your brain that deterministically do so.
That only works on hard determinists, and I think they're full of shit too. People have choices, and there are consequences to those choices. If you think otherwise, produce your evidence to support it. Of course, if you really believe that, then you can't choose to do anything since your actions are all predetermined, so you can't produce evidence, and I couldn't help but ask you to do so, and the whole thing is completely useless. It's pointless. It's just laughable. People have no choice but to commit crimes, and we have no choice but to put them in prison. So why are we doing this again? Oh right, we have no choice, right?
Most importantly, the love you have for anyone that you know becomes meaningless. It boils down to your genetics and your want to reproduce to continue the genetic line.
To some degree, sure. Biology certainly plays a role, but you don't have to love somebody to do that. People breed all the time, seemingly at random. The religious, some religions more often than others, they get off raping people. Do you think they loved the woman they beat and raped? Are you out of your ever-loving mind? Love is just an electrochemical reaction in your brain, but it is something that developed by evolution to strengthen human societies because humans are biologically social animals. That is how we survive. You might want it to be all special and wonderful, but it's not. It's just brain chemistry doing what brain chemistry does. And you notice how often these people appeal to emotion, right? Maybe there's a problem with that.
This is the reality that many atheists fail to realize that they live in.
Nope. I mean, we're just fine with it, though. You're the one complaining. If this guy ever saw this video, which I doubt, but if he ever did, where I called out all of his misconceptions, it would be him with the problem. If he dared to say anything at all, it would be, but I don't like that, as if I give a shit what he likes. I'm fine with reality as it actually exists because I don't have a choice in the matter. There it is. I gotta learn to deal with it. This is the way that it is, and I have zero say in the matter. And that's hard for a lot of people to understand. Too bad.
And by no means am I saying that this proves God or that theism is true. All I've shown is the sad and nihilistic reality that atheism provides if you accept it.
It makes me sad. Wah! This is the height of stupidity. But it doesn't make me feel good. So what? Where did you get the idea that reality has to pander to you? These are people with serious mental and epistemic problems because they can't deal with the world that they actually live in. They have to invent a new one in their heads because actual reality is just too scary. Wah! Stop making a fool of yourself. I know you can't help it, but still, at least try.
Albert Camus once said, basically, at the very bottom of life, which seduces us all, there is only absurdity and more absurdity. Thank you for watching, and God bless.
Maybe. Not the God bless part, but you can see life as absurd if you're only looking for something that makes you feel good. Because at the end of the day, we're just animals living on an irrelevant planet in the middle of nowhere, going through our days, doing what we do until we die and rot. A lot of people don't like that. They're not emotionally comforted by that. So what? It's still what's true, to the very best of our ability to figure it out anyhow. Yet people don't like it, which is why they make up religions, so they can play childish make-believe and not have to deal with the reality that's right there in front of them. There are 8 billion of us out there at the moment, and one day they're all going to be gone, and humanity is going to be forgotten unless somebody comes along later on and sees us as a biological curiosity on a dead planet. Nobody gives a shit if we're happy. Welcome to the real world. Nobody gives a damn if you like it. Grow the fuck up. At least try. You're just making yourself look like a complete imbecile otherwise. And sadly, that's not any surprise at all. So anyway, what'd you think of all this? This guy was just a complete dipshit, but then again, couldn't we say that about all of them? Let me know down in the comments what you thought. Did he have any good points? Was I off base on anything? I'm sure the philosophy fanboys are going to have something to say, but they always do. It's not going to impress me, but go ahead, let it all out in the comments below. So anyway, take care of yourselves. We'll be back in another couple days with another video, and hopefully the next one's going to be more intelligent. It really can't be worse.